Okay, so today we'll start this new topic, this crystal field theory, right? Or it's also commonly known as CFT, right? Regarding what? Regarding the transition metal ions, right? So you know that transition metal actually forms some compounds which are known as complexes, right? And you have read Werner's theory in your plus 2 level, right, regarding these complexes, right? But Werner's theory, and then there was a theory, the VBT, the valence bond theory, also explained some of the formations of these transition metal complexes. But again, as was the case with oxygen molecule that VBT could not explain, it was paramagnetic, there was difficulties in explaining these properties of transition metal complexes with VBT also, right? That's why there was this crystal field theory came into being, right? It was actually proposed by Hans Bethe, a physicist, while working in the Los Alamos that Manhattan project, the Manhattan project for discovery of that atomic bomb, right? While working there, he discovered this crystal field theory, right? It was actually first mostly used by physicists, then chemists actually borrowed this theory to explain their transition metal complexes. Right. Now we'll see that this crystal field theory also have some drawbacks or shortcomings, and it is modified further to molecular orbital theory. There are now molecular orbital theories for these transition metal complexes, but we will not go into discussion of that because it's not included in our curriculum. We'll just discuss crystal field theory. Now before going into crystal field theory, right, let us first look at the shapes of d orbitals. Now you know that as there is one kind of s orbital, three kinds of p orbital, that is px, py, pz, there are 5 kinds of d orbitals, right? Namely dyz, xy, xz, dz square and dx square minus y square, right? Now these three, if you see the first three, right, they have lobes, right, similar to like p orbitals, but there is a subtle difference between p orbital and d orbitals, right? See, in p orbitals, right, you had lobes which was out of phase. The two lobes are out of phase. Here you see the opposite lobes are in phase. These are in phase, right? The other two lobes are out of phase, right? So there is a center of inversion. There is an center of inversion, or which we denote as I. Right? This will be important in our discussion today. That's why I mentioned it before only. So now we have a center of inversion which was absent in case of P. Right? In all of them you can find that center of inversion. Right? Now this formation of x square minus y square and this z square can be thought of as combination of the two other wave functions, right? That is z square minus y square and z square minus x square. Now if you just combine them, just think about the picture, right? If you just combine them, what will you get? You will get an enhanced electron density along the z axis, and along the xy plane there is a donut type of thing, right? Donut, a ring of that is in a different phase, right? So you have this z square like this, the shape of like this, right? So the 5 orbitals that we will work with are this one, right? It is just I showed you how the z square is built up, right? If you do not remember this, that is also fine, but you have to remember the shapes of these 5 orbitals, right? Now you do not have to remember them separately. There is an easy way. See, these first 3, the xy, the yz and the xz, the subscript gives you the plane in which they belong. Suppose this is the xy, dxy belongs to the xy plane, the plane of x and y, and where the lobes point out, they point out in between the axis, right? So for xz it is in the xz plane, for yz in the yz plane, and the lobes point towards in between. That means this is 45 degrees, and right, this is 45 degrees. Okay. So in between the axis, so you can easily remember these shapes. For z square, as its name says, that it is along the z axis with a ring on the xy plane, and for x square minus y square, it has same shape as the xy, but only thing is it is also located in the xy plane. The only difference is with the dxy is that now it is pointed, the lobes are pointed toward along the axis. See, it is along the axis. Here it was between the axis, where it is along the axis, right? So this is the 5 orbitals. Right. Now let us see what the salient features of crystal field says us, right? First of all, we have to remember that this is a mere electrostatic model. What does electrostatic model means? That means it just consider the electrostatic attraction between positive charge and negative charge, right, and nothing else. So it simply uses ligand electrons to create an electric field around the metal center. So what are ligands? I think you know this name because you have read complexes in your plus 2 courses. That what are ligands? Ligands are either atoms or ions or molecules who donate their one of the electron pair to the central metal ion to form bonds with them, right? So these are ligands, right? We have considered here at ligands. This negative sign is there, but we know that ligands can either be negative sign or it can be neutral also, right? So it considers ligands and the metal as only point charges. Point charges means that it has no volume. See, only a point negative or only a point positive charge, right? So it considers only the electrostatic interaction between these things. And there is no metal ligand covalent interaction. That means there is no metal ligand orbitals overlapping. So only the attraction of opposite charges is there, right? And this is one of the most simplistic model, and this is simplification, right? Actually, and this oversimplification actually brings about the drawbacks of crystal field theory. That easily you can understand that ligands, even if it is the smallest ligand, right? Suppose it is atomic ligand like say Cl minus or bromine minus, even if they have some volume, right? The smallest ligand have some volume, and it cannot be considered actually as point charges, right? First thing, metal, similarly metal ion also have some volume, and we'll later see that there are actually some overlaps, metal ligand overlaps, and that's why this crystal field theory was modified to ligand field theory and subsequently to molecular orbital theory, which gives better results, right? But as a starting point, crystal field theory was a very good improvement over the valence bond theory and oneness theory, right? So this metal ion will be positive and therefore attract the negative charge ligands. So this is the main concept of crystal field theory, right? So there are point charges, so metal ion is positively charged and it will attract negative charges, right? But at the same time, it also considers the repulsion between the electrons of the ligand and the electrons of the metal itself, right? So in metal orbitals there are ligands also, right? So that is also considered here. Now you see in details that what happens when the ligands approach the metal, right? Now As a starting point, we will consider the octahedral geometry as it is shown here, right? This is the octahedral geometry, right? This is our octahedral geometry. Octahedral means so there is an easy way to draw it also. Suppose you draw a rhombus here, right? And you draw lines like this. Right. So this is our octahedron, right? Octahedron. Why octahedron? See, there are 6 vertices, but it is called octahedron because it has 8 faces, right? It has 8 faces. You can count it. It has 8 faces. It is highly symmetrical. I have drawn it like this. These are not longer than the upper bonds. They are all similar, right? A regular octahedron has all faces equilateral triangle, and these bond angles are 90 degree, right? We have studied it in VSEPR theory also. Okay, now let's see this how does it look like when these ligands approach the metal ions from 6 directions. 6 direction means from x minus, y minus, z minus, right? So suppose in position A, this metal ion is being approached by these 6 ligands, right? Now if it is far away, all the orbitals would behave similarly. Why? Because all the 6 ligands are relatively far away. But when it comes closer, then they can differentiate between the orbitals. See, let us first take the case of x square minus y square. This x square minus y square, in these 4 lobes, actually they experience these 4 ligands directly, isn't it? All the 4 lobes experience them. For z square also, they experience these 2 ligands directly, and this ring also experience these 4 ligands, right? In the same plane. But for these 3, you see, none of them faces the ligands directly. The ligands approaches in between them because these lobes are between the axes, right? So ligand, the minimum distance between the or the minimum angle between the ligand and the lobes of the orbital is 45 degree in all of these cases, right? Only the planes are different, but it is the same case, right? Now as a result, what happens? As a result, now this orbital, the dz square and dx square minus y square, they experience more repulsion. The electrons in these orbitals, if the electrons are in these metal orbitals, they will experience more repulsion than compared to these 3 orbitals, that is xy, yz and xz, right? That's why as a result of this, what we know that there is a change in energy. Now these 5 orbitals in the naked metal ion or isolated metal ion was degenerate, right? They were first degenerate, but their degeneracy is broken. This is shown in this slide. See what is happening here, right? You must have seen these kind of figures in your book, right? But this is important to show this one also, right? This is the metal ion and the 6 ligands at an infinite distance away. That means the system, metal system and the 6 ligand system separately, right, isolated. So this was the energy, right, for the metal ion. Now when they were approaching, when the 6 ligands were approaching, right, they have not approached completely, they were just approaching. Suppose this one, this case, this position, right, then we have what happens, the field, electric field around the metal one can supposed to be spherical, right, because there is no directional property, because they are approaching from all directions, and as a result all the metal orbitals were experiencing similar type of repulsion, and their energy is raised to some extent, right? We get this one this result. Now after that, when it was coming more closer, right, and the orbitals could differentiate between the incoming ligands, or you can say the ligands could differentiate between the orbitals, right, then their degeneracy was broken. It was still degenerate in this case, then their degeneracy was broken, that dz square and x square, because they have gone up compared to this one, this position, and this 3 has gone down compared to this this degenerate position as in the spherical field, right. But they will never go below this isolated metal ion, right. It cannot go beyond this one, because this is isolated, this is always low in energy, this is not experiencing the repulsion. Here there is repulsion, however less, there is some repulsion and it is going up, right, but in compared to the spherical field, it has gone down. So this is important to note, that this splitting of d orbitals is in respect to the spherical field, right, not to the naked metal ion or for free metal ion, right. This is important. Okay, so this is called crystal field, your thing that is splitted, right. Now we will consider only this part, because this is now our concern, right. Now in the last figure we have seen that this 5 degenerate orbital, this is still degenerate orbitals are splitted in energy. Now this is what? This is our barycenter. This is our barycenter, right. Now as we have seen in case of MOs, right, for hydrogen, if you remember, I said that this antibonding and bonding, they will of equal distance. Suppose if this is E, this will also be E, the energy is the same. But in this case it is not same. Why it is not same? Because the numbers are also not same. Barycenter is there, so to balance the energy between them, here that weightage of 3 orbitals should be equal to the weightage of these 2 orbital, right. The energy increased for these 2 orbitals should be equal and same as the energy decreased total for these 3 orbitals, and you can easily divide it. If you see, if you think this difference as del oct, why del oct is given? Oct stands for the octahedral crystal field, right, and delta, you know, delta is usually denoted for any differences. So this difference in energy is denoted by delta, and the subscript OCT is for the octahedral field, right. And in your books or in some questions you will find there may be given 10 dq, right. You don't need to worry. This 10 dq is actually equals to this octahedral field, right. This 10 dq is a mathematical origin, but it is also used in chemistry and spectroscopic terms, right. And it can be used in equivalent terms with delta oct, right. But be sure to use only one convention in your answers, right. If you in your answer you use 10 dq, then from start to end you use only that convention, that is 10 dq. If you use your the delta convention, then use delta convention. Do not mix up. That is important. Okay, see here, if you divide this in ratios of 2 and 3, you will get that this energy is raised by 0.6 delta oct, and this is lowered by 0.4. So minus sign is shown for this stabilization, stabilizing, and this is destabilizing, right. Right. Similarly, if in terms of dq, you can easily say this 10 dq can be divided in plus 6 and plus 4, right. You see, suppose 3 multiplied by 0.4 gives you what? Minus 1.2, because 3 multiplied by minus 0.14, and similarly this plus 0.6 into 2 will give you 1 plus 1.2. So you see, they will cancel out each other, right. So that is why this it is not equal. Okay, so this is our crystal field splitting for octahedral fields, right? One more thing you see is written here. If you mind it, we have denoted it as EG and this term as T2G, right? For the time being, it's not in the scope of this class to describe these terms, right? They are group theoretical terms and relation to spectroscopy also, but it's not possible for me to describe all these things in this lecture. But why you use that, we can get an idea, right? So before that we'll come to this EG and T2G, but before that we'll consider the tetrahedral crystal field first, right? But just remember that for now, that in case of octahedral field, the dx, dy, dz are called T2G, and the upper two, that is dx, j square and dx square minus, are called EG, right? I think in the last lecture we discussed about G, right? Last or previous lecture, G is for Girardet, right? So keep that thing in mind. We will come to this very quickly. Now next important geometry in our complexes, transient metal complexes, is this tetrahedral field, right? Now if you think this is a cube, right? This the diagram on your the right hand side, if you see, this is a cube, and if you put an atom, say the metal atom, at the center of the cube, right? So this is the metal atom at the center of the cube, and if you put 4 ligands in such a way that you put one ligand in the alternating vertices or corners of the cube. Alternating means there are 8 corners of a cube, right? You put here one, you leave here, you do not put anything else, right? Beside the neighboring corners, you put in the other corner. Similarly, you do not put anything here, you put here, right? If you do this, what will form is called a tetrahedron. See, if you join them, right, you will see you are forming a tetrahedron, right? You are just forming a tetrahedron here, right? So a tetrahedron can easily be drawn like this. You draw an equilateral triangle, any point here, you join these two and the top vertices, so you get a tetrahedron. So here our structure is like this, similar to methane, right? Now you see how the tetrahedral field or the ligands approach the our orbitals, d orbitals. Here we took 2 specific cases, the yz and z square. This yz discussion will also be same as that for xy and xz, right? See, now the axes are along this, right? The axes are coming out from the face of the middle of the face of the cube, right? So they are coming from here, these sides, right? That means the x square minus y square is along this side and the z square is shown here, right? Now in this case, none of the ligand is approaching directly to any of the orbitals, right? None of the orbitals is facing the ligands directly. See, for the EG set, you see the x square minus y square and z square, here also they are apart, right, away from the orbital lobes, and in this case the axes are in this side, of course, right? So the ligands here are also away, right? In octahedral field they were this much apart, in tetrahedral field also they are away from the lobes of the orbitals, right? Now you see which is near. Now you do not have any direct. Now let us see which is near. See, for YZ, the ligand is how far away? It is half the edge. Suppose the edge of the cube is A, then it is half the edge. It is A by 2. Where in case of dz square, it is half the diagonal. What is the diagonal of a this one, the square? Root 2 into a, right? So it is half of root 2 into a, right? So which is larger? This figure is larger. This half of root 2a is larger than root 2a. That means now these orbitals, these xy, yz and zx, these orbitals are now closer to the ligands than the dz square and dx square minus y square, right? None of them is directly facing, but this set is closer, right? As such, now the reverse thing happens. Reverse of the this octahedral field occurs, right? See, now this dz square and x square minus y square has gone down compared to the barycenter, and xz, yz and xy has gone up, right? And see, the now splitting is also lower. Why the splitting is so less? This is less because there is no direct repulsion between the orbitals, electrons in the orbitals and the electrons of the ligands, right? There is, all of them are now away from the ligands. As such, the interaction is lower, so the splitting of this energy is also lower. And in fact, if you can see it, that delta tet stands for this tetrahedral, is nearly 50% of this delta octahedral. 50% means if you have the same metal ligand system, same charge, everything else is same, then you will have nearly 50% of what would have been if it was octahedral, right? So the crystal field splitting is much lower in case of tetrahedral. Now you can see the difference. See, it was termed the EG set, these two, whereas this is termed as now only E. The G is gone. The G is gone here. Similarly, it was T2G. Now that G is gone here, right? This is only T2. There is no G here, right? Because there is no center of inversion here, right? In an octahedral, there is a center of inversion. So there was, it is that's why it was called Girardet. Whereas in tetrahedral field or tetrahedral thing, there is no center of inversion, right? So why there is no center of inversion? Because if you start from here, right, suppose you are going r distance, now you go on in the same direction r, you will find nothing here, right? So it is not, there is no center of inversion. That's why the subscript G is gone, right? So we call it here only T2 and E. T2 and E. Now one thing to remember, that for any metal ligand system, everything other thing are concerned, is same, right? Then which will be preferred, this octahedral geometry or this square planar, all the other fields will be preferred over tetrahedral geometries, because they produce very less crystal field, right? Now you see, we have gone here, this square planar, this is another important geometry after this octahedral and tetrahedral. In fact, there are more square planar complexes than tetrahedral complexes, right? The square planar and octahedral are the main geometries of our transition metal complexes, right? Now what is square planar? Suppose you start with the octahedral complex, right? Now if you start with octahedral complex, it was equivalent, all the metal ligand bonds are same. Now suppose you are removing the ligands along the z axis, right? Along z axis you are removing the ligands, right? And if you have completely removed it, what you will get? You will get a square planar complex. So this is how we can determine the crystal field structure of the square planar also. Suppose you start with as we started the picture here with this octahedral complex, we start with the same energy diagram of this octahedral field, right? Now you are removing the ligand along the z axis. What will happen? The repulsion along the z axis will decrease and the orbitals along the z axis will go down compared to this level, Eg level, and to maintain the barycenter, this x square minus y square will go up. Same will be the case here, right? Anything with the components of z, so these two will go down, right? Because they have some components along the z plane, right? X, y and y, z. So anything which have components of z will come down and this x, y will go up, right? So it is the picture that is corresponding to this one, this one, right? This situation, that is you are removing the ligands, but the ligands are not totally removed, right? Now if you completely remove it, this is the ultimate case. What happens? The z square goes down even below the x square minus y square, x square, xy, right? And this x square minus y square goes even higher, and the orbitals with components of z, that is xz and yz, also goes down, right? And this is our now splitting for tetrahedral. This is our delta for square planar, right? Okay, so this is our crystal field for splitting diagram for square planar, right? Now here you can easily see nickel Cl4, palladium Cl4 2 minus, all are in 2 plus state. So platinum Cl4 2 minus, right? They belong to the same group, right? Nickel, palladium, platinum, right? They have similar electronic configuration, and in all of if they are plus 2 states, they are all D8, right? 3D, 4D and 5D, that is different, but they are all D8 system, right? Now it is interesting to note that these two are diamagnetic, while the nickel one is paramagnetic. Right. This can be explained with this crystal field theory, right? See this, suppose you have d electron, if you want to put 8 electrons, right, you will follow the Hund's rule. So 6 are gone, 2 is here, right? Why this does not goes here, I will later show you why it is not going here, right? Okay, so see, no unpaired electrons, so everything is paired up, so diamagnetic. But for tetrahedron system, it would have been right. So there are 3 unpaired electron. That's why this is paramagnetic, because nickel and chlorine does not produce much crystal field, and they are tetrahedral, right? This is tetrahedral and this is square planar. Okay, so after learning this square planar crystal field, let us just have a quick look to the relative energies of these different types of geometries, right? Of this we have learned this octahedral and square planar, which are the most common, right? There are other structures, but you need not worry about remembering all those structures, these energy diagrams. Just this, I have shown this slide just to show you that the comparing crystal field energies between these things, right? Now can you guess what will be the cubic? Now this I gave you as an homework. Try to find out the cubic crystal field, right? And also write down the levels. It is T2G or EG and all these things, right? So write down these levels also. Okay. So this was our homework about to find out the cubic crystal field. Okay. Next topic of discussion is that what are the factors that affect the magnitude of delta. Right. This is important. This will be important to study the magnetic behavior also. Okay. So what are the factors that affect the magnitude of delta, that is the crystal field splitting. The first one, as we have already seen, the geometry and the number of ligands. Okay. Now we have seen that the more the number of ligands, more is the splitting, right? As is the case of octahedral and tetrahedral. And we have clearly seen that the tetrahedral is more or less hardly 50% of that of octahedral. Here are some examples you can see. Having the same ligand, same metal ion in the same oxidation state, only the geometry is different. This is octahedral, 6 ligands, this is tetrahedral, 4 ligands, right? And this is the symmetry, the symbols of symmetry, group theoretical symbols, right? OH stands for octahedral, TD is for tetrahedral. You see the splittings are given in centimeter inverse. Centimeter inverse is also a unit of energy, right? Wave numbers. So you can see it is less than half or nearly half, right? Another example is shown here, cobalt and ammonia in octahedral and tetrahedral. Here also it is see that it is nearly 50%, right? So geometry and number of ligands is the first factor to be considered when you consider the magnitude of delta. Now I have given you already a task of finding out the cubic octahedral field. Another task for you is to find out these values in kilojoule per mole, right? You can note down the values, right? Or I can send you. You have to find out these values in kilojoule per mole, right? Okay, I will send it to you. Do this exercise. Okay, now let's go to the second factor. So first was one as our geometry and the number of ligands, right? The second one is the oxidation state of the metal cation. Now we have to keep the all other three things constant. What are the other three things? The metal has to be constant, the ligand has to be constant, the geometry has to be constant to compare it. See the first two. Metal same, ruthenium, ligand same, water, geometry same, octahedral. Only what is differing? The oxidation state. Here it is 2, here it is 3. So higher the oxidation state, higher will be the crystal field splitting. Why? The explanation is very simple, because greater the positive charge, greater will be the pull, right? The ligands will be more pulled toward more the metals more strongly, and what will happen? It will interact more with the metal orbitals, right? This interaction of the ligands, these point charges are the charges, and it will induce more splitting, right? So now you see it is much more, right? Then this plus 2. The plus 2 was nearly 20,000 centimeter inverse, it is nearly 30,000. So an increase of nearly 50% now. Right? Similar is the case with this example. You see, it is ferrocyanide and ferricyanide. Right? So this is iron 2 and this is iron 3. Right? And there is an increase. So first one was our number of ligands and coordination number. Second is our the oxidation state of metal. Third is the metal size of the metal cation. Size of the metal cation. Now we have to keep the other three things same. That means we have to keep the geometry same, octahedral in all three cases. You have to keep the ligand same and the oxidation state also same. What we have discussed here, you see, when you are going from 3D to 4D to 5D, we have taken examples of cobalt, that is 3D, 4D and 5D. As you are going there, the shape of d orbital is increasing, right? or the size, sorry, not the shape remains same, the size of d orbital is increasing. Now as the size of d orbital is increasing, right, so more and more there is better interaction between the ligand and the metal orbital, so this induces more and more splitting. Now see, actually we have already deviated from the basic principle of crystal field theory, that considering that is metal and ligand as only point charges, right? Now only we are discussing that there is an interaction, and in fact that is so. That's why you can explain these things. There is better interaction between ligand and orbitals and metal, right? That's why the splitting is more, right? So from going from 3D to 4D there is nearly 50% increase, and going from 4D to 5D there is 25% increase, right? So this is the third factor, that when you increase the size of the metal cation, that means you are going from third series to fourth series to fifth transition series, first, second to third transition series, then the crystal field splitting will increase, right? And lastly, the fourth factor is the identity of the ligand itself. I think the most important factor in this case, right? So here we have to keep all the other things same, that means same metal ion, same geometry, right? Same geometry and same oxidation state. Keeping these things same, right, if you vary the ligands, right, they will actually give you in this series, the crystal field will be in this series as shown here, right? See, there are ligands of different types. These are only halide ligands, and there are some carbon monoxide, cyanide, phosphine, right? These are, as we discussed in previous class during our molecular orbitals, that we discussed that carbon monoxide is a pi acid ligand, right? Now this pi acid ligand we have already discussed induces very strong crystal field, and that can be possible only when there is a very strong interaction between metal and ligand, right? And we know that this occurs via the back bonding from metal to ligand pi orbitals. Okay, now these three, phosphine, cyanide and carbon monoxide, all are highly poisonous because they can form very strong bonds, right? We know, and they are found in the extreme right end of this series, showing that they form produce very strong crystal field, and they are so called strong field ligands, right? And these are called weak field ligands, right? These are just sigma donors, and these are pi sigma donors and pi acceptors, and they are these pi donors, right? This is called the spectrochemical series, right? Spectrochemical series, right, of ligands, right? There is something called spectrochemical series of metals also, which will not discuss here. Okay, so this series shows you that if the metal geometry and oxidation state remains same for that particular system, if you vary the ligands, this will produce a crystal field in this order, right? Now these are the four factors which affect the magnitude of delta. Now from this you see, if you consider this crystal field theory, as we have seen that crystal field theory consider ligands as only point charges, then you expect that Cl minus, which has a negative charge, will produce more crystal field, will affect the splitting more than a neutral ligand like water, isn't it? Because water is neutral. Or if you see that OH minus has a negative charge, right? This hydroxide ion would produce more crystal field right? Magnitude of the delta would have been more than that of water if the crystal field in crystal field theory, what we consider that ligands are just point charges and there is only electrostatic interaction between metal and ligand, then a positive charge metal and the negatively charged ligand would produce more interaction than a positively charged metal ion and a neutral ligand, isn't it? But it is not the case. You see, this water is much higher than chloride, bromide, fluoride and also this hydroxide, right? This can be explained only if there is a strong interaction between metal and ligand orbitals rather than only mere electrostatic attraction, right? So these are the shortcomings or drawbacks of crystal field theory. This was our discussion about the first part of our crystal field theory. I think I will end it today here. So what we learned today, the basic principles of crystal field theory, the energies, how the energies of the d orbitals are splitted, the degeneracy of the d orbitals are broken in various crystal field like octahedral, tetrahedral and square planar, and how the magnitude of this splitting is affected by various factors, namely the geometry, the charge of the metal ion, the size of the d orbitals, and lastly we have seen that of ligands, right? In the next lecture we will study the electronic configuration of transition metal ions and their magnetic properties, right?